By the way, what was the game you were playing the night Dad lost the ranch?
Oh, blackjack.
Blackjack? Are you sure it was blackjack?
Well, of course I'm sure.
Well, you know what Pa always told us. Wouldn't be caught dead playing blackjack. Shoot the first one of his kids he saw playing it. Thought it was a woman's game.
Welcome to today's show. My name is John. As always, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, formerly known as iTunes, or follow the links to social media in the podcast show notes. So please subscribe when you're finished listening. You can also go to classicmovierev.com to read notes, bios, and other random movie thoughts. Today's movie is The Sons of Katie Elder, 1965. This is pretty standard John Wayne fare, where four bad sons come home to find out why their dead mother has lost her farm. The movie has a 7.2 rating on imdb.com and a 100% rating on the Tomato Meter and 81% audience approval. I think those ratings are way too generous. New York Times film critic Howard Thompson said, "The Sons of Katie Elder is a good, tough, unpretentious, and gory little western with a professional stamp and a laconic bite. It has most unobtrusively an ace director, Henry Hathaway, who knows exactly how to spike, menace, and mayhem with authentic settings and excellent color. So, fun movie to watch, but maybe not the greatest film ever." This movie was remade as Four Brothers, 2005, and although it had Marky Mark and Andre 3000 Benjamin of Outkast, it was terrible. Actors.
Right, and I'm a Shakespearean actor.
There are a lot of returning actors, beginning with John Wayne as the oldest brother, John Elder. Wayne was first covered way back in Episode 2, Chisholm, 1970. Martha Hire was in the role of Mary Gordon. Hire was first covered in Episode 22, First Men in the Moon, 1964. Michael Anderson Jr. played the youngest brother, Bud Elder. Anderson was first covered in The Glory Guys, 1965. Earl Holliman played Matt Elder. Holliman was first covered in Episode 78, The Big Combo, 1955. Jeremy Slate was cast as Ben Latta. Slate was first covered in Episode 72, The Born Losers, 1967. The great Strother Martin was Jeb Ross. Martin was first covered in Episode 3, McClintock, 1963. Paul Fix, who was in just about every movie, played Sheriff Billy Wilson. Fix was first covered in Episode 15, The Undefeated, 1969. George Kennedy played a large role as hired killer Curly. Kennedy was first covered in Episode 4, In Harm's Way, 1965. John Duchette as Heisselman was a friend of Katie. Duchette was covered in Episode 106, Big Jake, 1971. John Quallen played Charlie Byler. Quallen was covered in Episode 66, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, 1962. James Gregory played bad guy Morgan Hastings. Gregory was first covered in Episode 119, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, 1970. Dennis Hopper played Dave Hastings. Hopper was born in Dodge City in 1936. Hopper began working in television in the 1950s. His first film was Johnny Guitar, 1950. This was quickly followed by classics Rebel Without a Cause, 1955, Giant, 1956, both with James Dean, and Gunfight at the OK Corral, 1957. Shortly after Dean's death, Hopper began acting out, and during the filming of From Hell to Texas, 1958, Hopper got into a conflict with director Henry Hathaway, forcing 80 takes on one scene until Hopper gave in. The director said Hopper was finished, which makes it seem odd that the director worked with him again on this film. Of course, Hopper wasn't done. In between drinking and drugs, Hopper continued to appear in films such as The Story of Mankind, 1957, where he played Napoleon Bonaparte, Hang 'em High, 1968, with John Wayne in True Grit, 1969, and most importantly, Easy Rider, 1969, which he helped write and produce. Hopper made films during the 1970s, but the first really good one was when he showed up as a photographer in Apocalypse Now, 1979. By the 1980s, he had curbed his bad habits and was ready to make some good films like the street racing film King of the Mountain, 1981, Rumblefish, 1983, The Osterman Weekend, 1983, My Science Project, 1985, Hoosiers 1986, where he played a drunk. Blue Velvet 1986, where he was totally nude. A Really Powerful True Romance 1993. Speed 1994. And the utterly horrible Waterworld 1995. Hopper continued to make movies until his death in 2010. Dean Martin played Tom Elder. Martin was born in Ohio in 1917. Speaking only Italian until he was 5, the young Martin worked hard jobs such as boxer, steel mill worker, and gas station attendant. Martin was a singer, but he parlayed that talent into an acting career. His funniest movies were The 16, where he paired with funny man Jerry Lewis. These films include My Friend Irma, 1949, At War with the Army, 1950, My Friend Irma Goes West, 1950, That's My Boy, 1951, The Stooge, 1951, Jumping Jacks, 1952, Sailors Beware, 1952, Scared Stiff, 1953, and The Caddy, 1953. Martin proved that he could do dramas, war films, and westerns as well. Notable films include The Young Lions, 1958, Some Came Running, 1958, Rio Bravo, 1959, Ocean's 11, 1960, Bells Are Ringing, 1960, Robin and the Seven Hoods, 1964, and The Sons of Katie Elder, 1965. Dean Martin was on television in The Dean Martin Show, 1965 to 73, which was rebranded The Dean Martin Comedy Hour from 1974 to 84. Martin was part of the Rat Pack, which generally consisted of him, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, Joey Bishop, and others. The group was originally formed and occasionally met at the home of Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. Martin jumped on the James Bond spy craze with 3 Matt Helm films: Murderers Row, 1966, The Silencers, 1966, and The Ambushers, 1967. He did a great job in Airport 1970, which may be the beginning of the disaster film. He wasn't above later career comedy with The Cannonball Run 1981 and its poor sequel in 1984. Martin toured and sang solo or with the remaining Rat Packers until his son died in 1987. Martin died in 1995 on Christmas Day. Okay, I'm really excited to announce that the ABCs of Film Noir is out. It's got 27 pieces of original art. There's a link in the show notes where you can go to Amazon and purchase the book, or you can go from the website and use that link and purchase it on Amazon. I really appreciate your support, and I think it'll make a great Christmas present. Story.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
A train travels through a mountain valley that doesn't look anything like Texas. 5 men are waiting for the train in Clearwater, Texas. 2 of the men are lawmen. The other 3 men are brothers: Tom Elder, Dean Martin, Matt Elder, Earl Holliban, and Bud Elder, Michael Anderson Jr. They are waiting on their older brother, John Elder, John Wayne. The 2 lawmen, Sheriff Billy Wilson, Paul Fix, and his deputy Ben Latta, Jeremy Slate, are waiting on John Elder too. The only person that gets off the train is an unknown man named Curly, George Kennedy. The sheriff says Curly is a bad type. Tom, Matt, and Bud head to the funeral. Outside of town there is a farm with a building marked Hastings Firearm Manufacturing. Morgan Hastings, James Gregory, is sighting in a rifle. Hastings' grown son, Dave, Dennis Hopper, is watching. Curly arrives and Morgan asks if anyone else got off the train and is told no. Morgan asks Curly if he's afraid of John Elder.
Did anybody else get off that train? Besides yourself?
No,
You know a man named John Elder?
I know of him.
Would you be afraid of him?
No, but you must be. That's usually why people hire me, because they're worried about somebody, scared.
Don't go jumping any conclusions.
Morgan has hired Curly as a gunman to protect him from John Elder. Morgan tells his son that the land they now own used to belong to the Elders. The sheriff and Lotta go back to town. There's a sign by the church that says Hastings Lumber and Fencing. The local undertaker, Heisselman, John Duchette, is preparing his coach. Lotta wants to wear his gun belt to the funeral because of Curly and John Elder. The funeral is for the mother of the Elder men, Katie Elder. They bury Katie next to her husband, and she has a pretty good turnout. John Elder watches the funeral unseen from the top of the ridge. The parson tells the sons that what he spoke was not good enough for their mother. Many other people there loved her as well. After the grave is filled, John comes down to look it over. Curly is watching from behind a different rock. Someone comes up behind John, who spins, throws his hat, and draws his gun. Great move. It's the sheriff. John says that he shouldn't come up behind a man like that. The sheriff asks John why he came in the back way. John says he doesn't want trouble. The sheriff tells John that he should leave soon because this is not his home anymore. There's a hired gun in town, and Deputy Lotta is a little gung-ho. The sheriff tells John that Morgan owns the ranch now and that his mother was living in another place since his father was killed 6 months before. John asks the sheriff what he's not trying to tell him, and the sheriff walks away.
I come to town to see my ma buried, Billy. And after that to maybe say hello to my brothers. Any objections?
Well, no.
When did that happen, Billy?
Your pa was killed about 6 months ago.
Who did it?
I haven't been able to find out. John, don't do anything foolish.
You've been trying real hard not to tell me something, Billy. What is it?
Curly lets Morgan know that John is in town. Dave is panicked about the thought of the elders asking questions about how they came by the ranch. John rides to the Lupin place where his 3 brothers are staying. The brothers are happy to see each other. They talk about Bud being in college. Bud tells them that the doctor said that Katie died from just being plain worn out. They all get a little upset that none of the others have visited their mother. Bud is obsessed with his oldest brother's gunfighting skills. A wagon arrives, driven by Mary Gordon, Martha Heyer. She knows all the brothers and has brought them some food. John remembers Mary from when she was a small girl. She says she is looking in on them only because Katie asked her to. Mary chastises the brothers for not being better towards their mom.
She liked that rocker.
She seemed to have confided a great deal in you, Miss Gordon.
Maybe if she'd had some of her sons around her, she wouldn't have had to confide in strangers. She told me what fine men you were. Never forgetting your mother, sending her money regular, helping her send Bud through school.
Katie has told Mary that the sons were always helping her out and that she had lost her 3 sons to Texas and was not going to lose Bud. They also talk about Katie's beloved rocking chair. Bud said that he was forced to go to college because he was accused of stealing a horse. Bud said Heisselman accused him of stealing a gray horse. Finally, John asked why Katie would sell 1,200 acres of good land. They decide to go to the bank to see how much money is there. John leaves his gun behind at the house. When the brothers get to town, John sends them on different missions to settle debts. Lotta is keeping an eye on them. Bud and Tom go to see Mr. Peavy, Percy Helton, at the general store about Katie's bill. Peavy says Katie owes $6.20. They find out that Katie has been making dresses and giving guitar lessons, and they are given $4.80.
Hey, Ma!
Yes, Sonny?
How much for those dresses Katie Elder made?
4 dresses at $2.50 apiece, and 2 guitar lessons at 50 cents apiece.
4 dresses at $2.50 apiece, and 2 guitar lessons at 50 cents. That means that I owe you $4.80.
Your ma took guitar lessons?
Yeah. I figured in her old age she could earn a living playing the guitar in the saloon.
John goes to see Heisselman about the cost of the funeral. Heisselman says that Katie has already paid him for her funeral with a gray horse. John asks if it's the same one Bud stole. Heisselman said that he and Katie did that to trick Bud into going to college. Finally, John asks about the burial of his dad. Heisselman tells a funny story about a Roman candle duel. Then John asks again how he died. Heisselman tells John that his dad was killed by being shot in the back. Morgan sends Curly to find out what Heisselman told John about his family and farm. The 4 brothers go to the bank and meet with Mr. Varner, James Westerfield. Mr. Varner talks about how hard Katie worked to support Bud. He tells that she only had a blue dress for winter and a gray dress for summer. He says there was no money in her account and that he let her stay in the Lupin house for free, even though Katie insisted on paying rent. Matt finally asks about the money from the sale of the ranch. Mr. Varner tells them that Katie had no money in the bank, and a fire destroyed the records, and he can't remember every transaction.
What did she do with the money she got out of the ranch? I mean, I know Ma wouldn't have just give that spread away.
I wouldn't know about that.
Did you keep records?
We had a fire. I'm sorry, but I can't remember every transaction.
John gives him a hard look and says, "Every transaction or just this one?"
Every transaction or just this one?
Curly arrives at Heisselman's business. Curly demands to know what he and John talked about. Heisselman refuses to talk. Finally, Curly starts dunking Heisselman's head in a pan of water. About this time, John comes back in and sees what's going on. He grabs an axe handle and smacks Curly in the face. Heisselman tells him that Curly is probably working for Morgan. John tells his brothers that they are going to look at the old ranch. They ride down to the house and knock on the door. Dave answers and he is very nervous. Dave says this is private property. Deputy Lotta arrives just as Dave orders them to get off the property. Lotta pulls a gun and tries to arrest the brothers. Tom jumps off his horse and takes Lotta's gun. John says he will go in, but not as a prisoner. Back in town, Charlie Byler, John Quallen, gets a kick out of the brothers riding behind the deputy. The sheriff tells the elders they can leave. John and Matt go to talk to the sheriff. The sheriff says their father lost the ranch to Morgan in a card game while he was drunk. There were 6 witnesses to the loss, and the father was murdered that night. The sheriff tells them to stop digging. John sees Mary and tells her that he would like her to have Katie's rocking chair. John and Matt go to the gun shop, where Morgan, Curly, and Bondi Adams, Rodolfo Acosta, are hanging out. Morgan shows them the transfer deed for the ranch. John says it's odd that all of the witnesses work for Morgan. Curly's face is not marked from the wooden handle smack. John asks Morgan what game they were playing, and Morgan says blackjack. John says his father thought blackjack was a woman's game and would shoot any of his kids for playing it.
By the way, what was the game you were playing the night Dad lost the ranch?
The game? Oh, blackjack.
Blackjack? Are you sure it was blackjack?
Of course I'm sure.
Well, you know what Pa always told us. Wouldn't be caught dead playing blackjack. Shoot the first one of his kids he saw playing it. Thought it was a woman's game.
Matt asks Morgan who he thinks is the low-down, dirty, stinking rat that shot their pa.
Well, tell me, Mr. Hastings, you know all the people in this town. Now, who do you think was the dirty, stinking, low-down rat that killed our pa?
Outside, Matt says that he and his brothers had always played blackjack with their dad. John says they know it, but Morgan doesn't. Good trick. Back at the Lupin house, the 4 brothers go through their mother's things. They find the family Bible. They argue about whether they should get their mother a grave marker.
Hey, the Ritters got their mother a marble angel with her finger pointing.
At who?
Nobody, pointing up like this.
All right, then, a marble angel.
Does it have to be an angel? I don't have too much in common with angels.
Oh, besides, take the Ritter's angel. Some kid shot her finger off, and after that, it looked like she was just shaking her fist.
Finally, John says the best monument to Katie is to have Bud go back to college. Bud says he wants to go with John, and they'll be famous like the Dalton brothers. John reminds him that the Daltons were hung. Actually, 2 of the Dalton brothers were killed in the 1892 Coffeyville, Kansas raid. Emmett was captured and spent 14 years in prison. John rides into town that night with the rocking chair and the Bible for Mary. Mary is happy to have them, but she feels odd not being family and taking the family Bible. She shows John a pack of letters that he sent to his mother and points out how he changed over time. Katie never noticed the changes. Mary asks John if he is going to try and find his father's killer. He says yes, and she says don't kill again and surely don't kill in front of Bud. Tom and Bud go to the bar, but Tom doesn't want to use his money to pay for drinks. He puts on an eye patch and pretends to remove a glass eye from behind the patch. He says it's worth $22 and he wants to raffle it off. The bartender offers him a free drink, but Tom refuses. Curly is watching from a card table in the back. Jeb Ross, Strother Martin, joins in the raffle. Tom puts 19 white and 1 blue poker chip in a hat. The men start drawing chips. Jeb takes his second draw and wins the eye. Tom offers to buy the eye back at a profit.
I might just have her made into a stick pin for Sunday.
Well, Ned, now how much would you take for it?
Take for one will keep her.
Tom gives him $4 and a drink. Then Tom drops the eye back in his pocket. Jeb asks him why he didn't put it back in. Tom takes the patch off and said it would be crowded in there. They all laugh. Curly, backed up by Bondy, says Tom is a cheat and a liar like his father. Curly tries to get into a gunfight with Bud. Bondy gives his gun to Bud. John walks in and everyone goes quiet. John agrees that their father was a drunk and a liar. He forces his younger brother outside. The sheriff comes in with a shotgun and orders John out. He makes Curly and Bondy stay in the bar. The next day, Bud is really upset about the way Curly talked to him. John says Bud would have been killed by Curly. John insists that Bud will go back to school. Bud takes Katie's old gun out of the drawer and says he's going after Curly. John backhands him and takes the gun away. When Bud tries to punch, John shoves him again. John throws the gun on the table and all of the brothers join in the Donnybrook. Finally, John is knocked through the door by Tom and Matt. When he looks up, Mr. Stryker, Rye Williams, is there looking for Katie. Stryker says that Katie wanted to buy 100 to 200 horses on credit. After they were sold, she would repay the money for the horses. Stryker thinks the deal is off since Katie has died. John asks if he can take the deal. The brothers all agree to drive the horses to Colorado and split the profits with Stryker. They plan to use the money to pay for Bud's college. That night, Lotta rides in hard and has a short conversation with Morgan. He and Morgan have a wanted poster showing that Tom Elder is wanted for murder. The sheriff is playing checkers with Judge Harry, and they both think that Tom doesn't seem to be the murdering type. They say Lotta is acting out of hate alone. Lotta gets a rifle and ammunition. The sheriff tells Lotta to go reluctantly to pick up Tom. Finally, the sheriff decides to go by himself.
Ben, the trouble with you is you're like an owl. The more light you shine on him, the less he sees. Where are you going?
I'm going out to get Tom Elder.
Not armed like that, you're not. And go reluctant, not like you enjoyed the idea of using that. I'll go myself.
There are 4 of them.
I can count 2, Ben.
Morgan offers to let Curly come along, and the sheriff asks what Morgan is trying to keep from the elders. Morgan races ahead of the sheriff and takes an ambush position above the Lupin Ranch. He shoots the sheriff in the back. However, he is not dead. Later, the sheriff's horse comes into town alone. Lotta forms a posse and they ride to the ranch. They find the sheriff still alive, and 2 men take him back to the doctor. The posse follows the Elder trail. The Elders have the 200 horses and are just beginning the drive north. They spend the first night camped by a river. John compliments Bud on his horsework and asks where he learned it. Bud says not in college. Bud asks which one of them is man enough to fill in for their ma, and the 3 brothers throw the younger in the river. All 4 end up in the water. In the morning, Tom sees the posse watching from the ridge. They decide to ride out like they've done nothing wrong, because they haven't. Bondy takes a shot at Bud and hits the horse. Lotta yells at Bondy for firing. Lotta leads the posse down to where the Elders are standing. They take the guns from the Elders and tie them up. The brothers are locked in a cell. Tom explains that a bartender got mad about the fake eye trick. When the bartender started firing, Tom had to fire back in self-defense. A mob forms outside the jail. Mary brings food to the men. She thinks they are guilty too. The sheriff is in bad shape. Lotta comes in and tells Mary to leave. He also says that the sheriff is dead and did not clear the Elders before he died. Mary demands that Lotta call the U.S. Marshals or transfer the brothers to Laredo for their safety. Tom pulls out a knife he has hidden in his boot and says they are breaking out in the morning. Morgan works the crowd outside. The judge refuses to set a trial date. Charlie chews out Lotta for not getting rid of the mob like the sheriff would have.
We got enough of those, Charlie?
No, we ain't got enough. Them guns ain't gonna stop no mob, and you know it.
What do you want to do, open the door and let him in?
Don't you talk to me like that, you young squirt. Me and Billy Wilson never lost a prisoner. Mobs or no mobs. He broke 'em up, and without no guns neither. I seen him do it. But then, you ain't no Billy Wilson.
Oh, he didn't mean anything by it, Charlie.
Well, why don't he use his head? If he was this much of a patch on Billy Wilson's shirt, he'd get those boys out of town before it's too late. Take a look out there. Them's friends of yours up until now, but pretty soon you'll be shooting bullets at them.
Lotta decides he will move them to Laredo in the morning. John takes the knife away from Tom. He throws it out the window. Lotta, Charlie, and some other deputies take the 4 men to the blacksmith shop. Bud doesn't want to be shackled to John. Matt and John are connected, and Bud is connected to Tom. The 4 are loaded into the wagon. Lotta deputizes some extra men. Outside of Clearwater, Morgan, Dave, Curly, and Bondi are waiting in ambush. The 3 wagon drivers and some of the deputies are also part of the ambush. They want to kill everyone and blame the elder brothers. When the wagon pulls onto a low bridge, the plan is launched. The driver stops on the bridge. John senses the trap, pushes the driver off, and takes his gun. 1 set of brothers jump into the water on each side of the bridge. Morgan and his men open fire. The wagon driver with Lotta pulls a gun and orders him to drop his rifle. The elders hide in some roots. They need more weapons, so Bud and Tom swim back to the wagon. Tom gets a rifle and sees the man holding a gun on Lotta. He shoots and hits the man. The wounded man runs away, freeing Lotta. Bud and Tom use the horses for cover as they get back to the bridge.
All right, Curly. This is what you were hired for. I don't want one of them elders to get out of here alive. Move!
Curly and Bondi come to where the other fake deputies are located. They have dynamite in the wagon, and Curly wraps a handful of sticks together. The elders move back, and Curly throws the explosives under the bridge. John sees the dynamite, yells, and jumps into the water. When it's over, Matt has a large wooden splinter in his stomach. He dies before he can say what he wants. Curly and his bunch attack, and Lotta watches from behind a tree. John is fighting like a madman using multiple guns. John kills Curly and another man. Bud gets hit. Lotta calls for John to throw him a gun so he can help. Morgan takes aim at Lotta. Dave tries to stop him, but Morgan slaps him away. Lotta leaps for the gun and Morgan shoots him out of the air. Great scene. When Morgan leaves, the rest of the fake deputies take off. Tom wants to run, but John says they have to take the remaining wagons back to town to get help for Bud. John drives a buckboard into town with the 3 remaining brothers. They hole up in the blacksmith's barn. John sends for the doctor. He also has the blacksmith take the leg irons off. Harry comes over to talk, and John tells him that he can prove they were in Pecos when the sheriff was killed. John wants a U.S. Marshal. The doctor comes into the barn, and they let the blacksmith go free. Harry orders the mob to disperse. The doc works into the night on Bud. Now Tom is suddenly concerned with Bud being raised correctly. Morgan and Dave wait at the gun shop. Men mill in the street, and the real deputies protect the barn from attack. Morgan slaps his son Dave around, and Dave flees. Tom sees Dave outside, and he tells John. John says Tom can't go, but when he leaves to tend Bud, Tom runs out. Tom sneaks across the town and captures Dave. Morgan sees what is going on from inside and shoots Tom in the back. The 2 men have a running gun battle, but Morgan gives up the chase as he gets close to the barn. Tom pushes Dave into the barn. John begins questioning him. Well, really enhanced interrogation. Creepy back-shooting Morgan breaks a window and fires. However, he hits Dave as John spins him around. As the wounded Dave staggers towards his father, he says he didn't talk, still trying to impress his father. Harry gets the drop on Morgan, who tries to talk his way out of trouble. Harry opens the barn door and Morgan runs away. Dave confesses about his father killing the elder dad, the sheriff, and Lotta. Harry hears the confession. Dave dies. Harry wants John's gun. Tom falls down next to the wounded Bud. Harry asks one more time to let the law handle it, but John says he has to do it himself. John does the John Wayne walk to the gun shop. John opens the door and Morgan starts firing. John dives into the darkness. John throws a can as a distraction, but he can't get Morgan. Finally, he rolls a keg of gunpowder across the floor. John dives out the door into the street and fires, hitting the gunpowder. The store and Morgan are blown to bits. John hands his gun to Harry. John begins to walk away and Mary calls him back. She says Bud will be okay with care, and Tom says it will take more than one bullet to kill him. When John walks by Katie's rocking chair, he pushes it and it starts rocking. World famous short summary. When the boys are really down, tell them to win one for Katie. Hope you enjoyed today's show. I really appreciate you spending the time listening. You can find connections to social media and email on my site at classicmovierev.com. There are links in the podcast show notes as well. Remember, this show is completely free and independent. All I ask is that you jump over to Apple Podcast and give me a review. It really helps the show get found. Beware the Moors.